Hey everyone, welcome back to Talking Sense. Today we're going to be having a look at one of the fragrances from the Xerjoff 1861 collection called Zefiro. So Zefiro came out alongside Naxos in 2015, and they were the second and third to the collection. They already had Renaissance, which had released in 2011. The notes in Zefiro, according to Fragrantica at least, in the top are bergamot, artemisia, white wine and elemi. In the middle we've got cardamom, cinnamon, carnation and iris. And in the base we've got honey, incense, woody notes and amber. Now, I'd say like majority of that is I go along with. I would take out one or two of those notes and I'd add a few as well. A lot of people that when I was sort of reading up about this were sort of saying that this is mainly a honey and amber fragrance and that the incense isn't really a big deal in it. I couldn't disagree more. It's I think on my skin at least. I mean, I know obviously it's all subjective. Fragrance is different, for everyone, but on my skin at least, this is all about incense, this fragrance. If you like incense, stick around, because this fragrance, it's just all it's about. The honey and amber in this, for me, in fact every other note and accord in this plays a supporting role to that incense. That's the slipcase. Take it out of the slipcase and we're greeted with this. So now this is actually quite a step up, I think. The old Xerjoff cases, quite often, they look quite nice from a distance, but once you get quite near, they were not really that great, actually. They were quite cheap. This one I feel is a lot better. It's a big step up. This is all kind of like PU leather, and it's all kind of like nicely padded, and it's all kind of stitched in as well. So that's quite nice. On the front there, you got the Xerjoff logo, and once you open it, we're kind of greeted with the Xerjoff logo in the top, and these kind of material, and they are actually kind of like a soft felt material, so they're not just paper covering the bottle. And the bottle, you get this little kind of tag, so you can lift that whole section out, which is quite nice, because then you can tuck these away and drop that back in, and you haven't got kind of flaps everywhere if you want to display it. And that's quite a nice touch. I think that's quite decent. I think it is a step up. Again, this is all like padded PU leather. The bottle itself, you got the kind of the gold label, like gold plaque, the Xerjoff, typical gold Xerjoff cap with inside. Don't know if you can see that. You should get the little Xerjoff logo and on the top and along the rim. So it's all got quite nice details. And on the back of the bottle, we got this kind of part of the frosted glass that's not frosted in the pattern, and everyone from the 1861 line has a different pattern. This is the Zefiro one. Same as on the old bottles as well, like the old design bottles. So yeah, it's quite nice. It's good. I think they've done it's a step up, and I do think that now they're kind of more reflective of the price of the fragrances, because as I say, some of the old Xerjoff presentations, they look quite nice until you got up close, and then they really weren't all that. But I like them in this 1861, the new bottles. Yeah, it's decent, it's solid, and I do think it deserves a little bit of a quick mention. So let's go. What does it smell like in the opening? Right, let's give it a spray. I've got the dry down already on this wrist. I've been wearing it all day. The opening is quite a shocker. Now, the very first thing, you're going to get hit in the face with a really big smoke and a lot of harsh green notes, actually. And I think that's from the Artemisia, and it's very bitter, and it gives the whole thing quite a dusty, dry feel, and very, very green, and like sort of dark green and bitter. And of course, then you've got the elemi, which is also quite bitter and astringent. It's very peppery, and I do also think there's some black pepper in here, because although the elemi is going to be kind of a little peppery, you can definitely smell quite a distinct black pepper. I think they sort of pop that in there to kind of say it's not listed in the notes, but I'm almost convinced that they've popped in some black pepper to kind of help bolster that elemi. And the elemi also gives off a kind of a strong kind of pine, sort of a woody character, but it's quite sort of, say, quite astringent. But it's really nice, and this might sound really gross, but it's really nice actually. It is quite harsh and it is quite bitter, but what it's kind of rescued by is the bergamot, and the bergamot in this is played really well because you see fragrances with bergamot on the top, and it's really kind of a cliche almost, that you spray the fragrance, you get a huge burst of citrus and bergamot, and 10 minutes later it's gone, right? But in this, it's played really nicely, and the bergamot just sits underneath and amongst everything else and just helps to kind of freshen up those kind of bitter, harsh green notes. It just kind of gives it something to kind of bring it back to kind of not being too just gross, basically. Now this, it doesn't really last very long, this opening. The elemi in this kind of starts giving it the first kind of hints at what's to come with the kind of incense, and it lasts about 10 minutes, this kind of opening that I just described. And then the first thing that's going to disappear, in fact it's already disappearing now, is the smoke. It opens with a big smoke, but it burns off very quick, and what starts kind of happening is the spices start coming out. And the main spices for me in this are cardamom, clove and cinnamon, and it very much at that point, if you're familiar with it, smells like ivory root, which is another Xerjoff fragrance from the Join the Club line. I've reviewed it. It's you can check it out. I'll put a thing up if you want. And they smell very similar at this point. In fact, at this point I would say they're almost identical, and if you're thinking of getting this and you've already got ivory root, I would really consider getting a decant, or recommend you getting a decant first and seeing if you feel like they diverge enough. I think they do, because they go through a period where they're both very, very, very similar, but ivory root takes one path and Zefiro takes another after about an hour. So what happens is these spices come out. Say you get a lot of cinnamon, a lot of clove and a lot of cardamom, and you get that kind of very sort of dry, desert, spicy feel that ivory root has. And if you're familiar with Tower, the desert Moroccan or whatever it's called, that sort of vibe as well. A lot of dusty dryness. But whereas ivory root for me, it moves down a vanilla kind of path, Zefiro instead sort of ducks off down the incense path. And so and they're very similar in the way they do it. So the spices come up, and then as the spices fade back, ivory root goes vanilla, this goes incense. So already starting to pick up some of that incense, but it's very much in the back, and all the spices are really sort of there for me now. So I've got the dry down here, and this is much more what this is moving to. And what it develops into, essentially, it steers away from the spices. They sort of tend to start dropping off like one by one, and we get a kind of sandalwood start coming out underneath that. Again, a bit similar to ivory root, but it's not quite as pungent as it is in ivory root. This sandalwood's much softer. It's sort of gently creamy and a subtle kind of vanilla to it. And it blends with the kind of the carnation and the iris as well, that all those kind of spices are sort of sitting on top of. And right underneath that, you do have some kind of honey and amber that starts coming out, but it's very buried at the moment. At the moment, all of this stuff is going on, but right on top of all of that is an incense, and the incense is coming up and up and up and up, and it's going to develop to the point where it's almost just straight incense. Now, the incense in this is, people call it churchier. Maybe it's my own kind of connotations here, sort of my imagination sort of running wild with this, but I get a feeling at this point of like an old kind of antique dusty library full of kind of books, but kind of like a concrete, a stone sort of in like an old building, basically. It's very, 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 very like antique, and yeah, it smells say churchy. You'd have to say it's churchy, but I just feel like it's older than that. It feels older than that. It doesn't feel like when you say sort of churchy incenses, they can still be kind of modern, right? But in this fragrance, I guess what I'm trying to get across is that in this fragrance, it smells super, super old fashioned. And I would say the incense, say it's very antique, like almost antique. And for me, it's quite somber and stoic and yeah, quite almost like melancholy, I guess. And this sounds kind of bad, right? I mean, no one really wants to kind of walk around smelling like that, I don't think. But luckily, the bergamont's still there, and it's the real saviour, and it's really great the way it's done. And basically, the bergamot just kind of creeps through underneath that kind of the incense, just to kind of help bring it up to modernity and give it some pep and all of that kind of stuff. The way I just described the incense is still there, but it's lifted just gently with the basically with the kind of sweetness from the iris and the carnation and the the bergamot, just the kind of citrus and the fruit of the bergamot just lifts it just enough, and without kind of getting in the way of it. You know, that's what's clever about it, is it lifts it enough, but it's not in the way. It's real kind of deep in the fragrance. I would say you can barely smell it, but you can definitely catch it. It's in there, but it's just underneath everything, and it's really quite well done. You know, it's blended really nicely, and so that's really kind of the body of the fragrance, and that's what you're going to get for a really long time. About 3 or 4 hours. That's what it's going to be. As it develops, really, it doesn't move much more than that. But I suppose what's going to really happen is everything else is going to really fall away completely. So all those spices and such, they're going to drop off entirely. The sandalwood's going to come up a little more. And really, for a long time, it's going to be just kind of sandalwood and incense with that kind of subtle bergamot just kind of striking through it. And then as that kind of drops off more, the amber and the honey kind of bloom out of it, I guess. So everything kind of comes off, and we're left kind of with this incense sitting on this kind of amber and honey. But the amber and the honey, they come really late in the dry down, to the point where they're prominent. I mean, I think they're probably always there, but they kind of sit in way, way back. And obviously with the kind of the incense being quite kind of churchy and Near Eastern, it's very resinous anyway. So they sort of sit below that, almost disguised by the incense. And then as that incense and all the spices drop off, the amber and the honey kind of get a bit of room to breathe. And that's where they kind of come in and play right at the end. You know, right at the end, they come out and they kind of bloom, and that's what we get there with a little bit of sandalwood. And it's really a great way to finish the fragrance. So really, that's what it will be, and that's what it will continue to be. And the incense will still be there, but a lot of that kind of churchiness will have gone away, and it's almost like just a gently sweet incense on top of some kind of amber and honey. But we're talking like sort of 5-6 hours into the fragrance at this point when this starts happening. So it's really kind of the dying embers of the fragrance. So that's pretty much it. That's the way it develops. I say it's very, very like a somber and classical incense, and it really is done well. So if you're not too into that, that's going to be the deciding factor for you if you can get on with this fragrance. I think if you like incenses, it's a really good example. It's a really nice, I think if you just want just like the one churchy fragrance, the churchy kind of incense fragrance, I really would recommend it. I think it's one of the better that I've smelt. I really think it's a nice fragrance. So in terms of versatility, I think it's actually quite versatile. I think you can wear it winter. I think it'll shine, but it does work in the kind of warmer weather. I wouldn't go too warm with it. Like maybe summer evenings and spring would be fine. Like anytime spring, but summer, like maybe later summer evenings would be the better option as opposed to the day. I'm not sure if it might be a little bit heavy and resinous for the kind of summer day. But yeah, I mean, I wore it today and it was quite sunny. It was about 20 degrees centigrade out, and it was fine. In fact, I enjoyed it. So I think it's only when it gets like kind of blistering summer you probably not going to get on with this. In terms of masculine and feminine, that's a really tricky question, and one I actually should have considered, because now I'm thinking about it, I'm not really sure. I would say probably unisex, but I think it probably leans a little masculine, to be honest, because of the woods underneath it, like the sandalwood. It's quite a rough sandalwood. It's got a bit of an edge to it, but I think anyone could wear it. Really, I'm sure anyone could wear it. It's quite an unusual fragrance, so I think really anyone would get away with it. Should have really thought about this before I did this. I mean, but yeah, no, I think anyone could wear it really. But I do think that it probably leans masculine. Okay, I'm going to say it's pretty unisex. I definitely think anyone could wear it, but it leans slightly masculine. But there's nothing there that makes it dead masculine. There's nothing in this that makes it particularly a masculine fragrance. The only thing that I think makes it lean slightly masculine is the kind of rough woods. But I think, so what? And I'm sure anyone could wear it. Dress it up, dress it down. I think it's pretty good casually. I wear it casually. Dressed up, it will of course shine. But just the quality of the ingredients will shine when it's dressed up. So you could definitely do that. And of course the quite stoic and somber, kind of austere incense is going to kind of work in a dressed up situation as well. So yeah, overall I think it's a really great fragrance. I think if you can get it for a decent price, I wouldn't probably pay the retail price for it, but I think if you can get it for a decent price, I think it's worth it. Although the retail's not too bad. It retails at what is it? I think it's about £200-ish, but that's for 100ml, so you could decant like half of that probably if you wanted. I think it's worth it. It's a great fragrance. Say it's very close to Ivory Root if you can pick that up as an alternative, but they do have their differences. A large part of it is close to Ivory Root, but whereas Ivory Root's going to go vanillic and sort of sweet, this is going to go incense and kind of a little bit more kind of straight and austere, and yeah, that kind of stoicism. But I think that's good, because I think it means they're both different enough if you want both of them. But otherwise, yeah, that's about it. It's a beautiful fragrance, very dry, very dusty, very sort of antique smelling. It's meant to smell like Rome. It's meant to be a kind of homage to Rome, and I feel that I can understand where they're coming from there. With it's very sort of classical side of that. It's definitely an Italian fragrance. It reeks of Italianness all over it. But yeah, otherwise, great fragrance. If you've, I feel like sort of in that 1861 line, Naxos gets the kind of all the hype. But I think this is actually a nicer fragrance than Naxos personally. But that might just be because I like smokes and incenses and things like that over kind of the sort of freshness of Naxos, which I think is a bit, I don't know, it's a nice fragrance, but I prefer Zefiro. So yeah, that's that. If you have any experience with Zefiro or any of the 1861 line, chuck it in the comments, let me know. And or any kind of churchy incenses, because I like incenses and I like exploring them. So if you've got any recommendations for kind of those real kind of churchy incenses, chuck them in the comments and let me know. So it's you know, I'm always interested in trying out new things. So yeah, like, subscribe if you want. Cheers, thanks very much. See you later.